Chapter 9 of It Happened in Egypt. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It Happened in Egypt by Charles Norris Williamson and Alice Muriel Williamson. Chapter 9. What Happened When My Back Was Turned. 3 letters from me, brought out by the pilot. One I had expected from Anthony, but my heart gave a pound as I recognized Bridget's handwriting, not seen for years, and instinct told me that the third was from Monty Gilder. My one thought for the last 2 days, steaming back from the Piraeus to Alexandria, had been that I was drawing nearer to Cairo, and to those whose doings in my absence pulled at my curiosity and keyed my interest to breaking point. But if you think that I tore open those envelopes and greedily absorbed their contents the moment they were put into my hands, you have never been a conductor or even an observant passenger on a pleasure yacht. When the letters arrived I was engaged in persuading breakfast lingerers, they of the eggs and bacon habit who ought never to leave their peaceful English homes, that it would give them more real pleasure to be the first in the shore boats than the last at the table. Then to get them into the boats, then to hypnotize Lady Biddle and Mrs. Harlow into the belief that they would not, could not, be seasick on the dancing waves which bobbed us up and down. No time to think of the letters, much less to feel the strangeness of fate, which brought me back in such queer circumstances to the port I had entered on the Laconia 8 days ago. As soon as we get on shore, I soothed my gnawing impatience, I'll steal a minute somehow. But each moment was so conspicuously labelled that I could not be a thief of time, my time, which was my charge's time, bought and paid for by Sir Marcus Lark. This was not the first occasion on which I'd heard the clanking of my chains, for although I flattered myself that I was a popular success, popularity had penalties. On the night of the lecture I had used the passengers. Since then they had used me. Old ladies appealed to me on questions of etiquette, health, or religion, and retailed my answers, not always correctly. Girls asked my advice about keeping up flirtations, and men wanted my help in getting out of them. I was expected to spout pages of Strabo or Pliny at an instant's notice. I must know why Plato went to Egypt, or how long he stayed, and be umpire between American and British bridge players. I must be able to explain the true meaning and age of the Sphinx, invent new deck games, and show those who hadn't learned how to dance the tango. But with those 3 letters burning over my heart, the duties of conductor became infuriating. It was an awful day, for what was Pompey's Pillar to me while I remained ignorant of my friends' adventures? As I discoursed, more or less learnedly, about Diocletian and Ptolemy's plot to drown Pompey in the Nile, something inside was asking, has Anthony fallen in love with Monty Gilder? What scrapes has that blessed girl got into? Has anything happened to worry Biddy? Even that nameless but incomparable tomb on the hill of Qam el Shakufa could not distract my thoughts from the sealed envelopes, and 3 very modern handwritings came obstinately between my eyes and the matchless wall paintings, paintings as fresh in their underground hiding-place as if finished yesterday instead of in days when it was dowdy to be pagan, fashionable to be Christian. Corcoran, as a soldier, had to guide a band to Aboukir and chat about Nelson, point out the medieval fort of Kite Bay, and dash with hired motors to Adjemi, where Napoleon landed. Kruger took a few studious pilgrims to that unspoiled Oriental Nile town where the Rosetta Stone gave the secrets of ancient Egypt to the world. It was mine to pilot the frivolous lot, to escort them in carriages round the Italian-looking city when they had absorbed its 2 chief sights, to give them a glimpse of the museum, and to let them see the beauty and fashion of Alexandria driving out to San Stefano in the late afternoon. Still I had no chance to read my letters, but, thought I at the hotel, now at last it has come. Not at all. People's trunks were missing or in the wrong rooms. It was I who had to soothe alarms and calm rising storms. It was I who must assure Mrs. Harlow that her room was really preferable to that of Lady Biddle, and Lady Biddle that she, and not Miss Hassett Bean, had the best in the hotel. Still, I had 10 minutes to dress for dinner. Like Mr. Gladstone, I could do it in 5, and have 5 left for my letters. But hardly had I slipped a paper knife under the flap of Monty's envelope, I should have felt a vandal to tear it, when one of the hotel managers knocked at my door. A gentleman was being very angry in the dining-room. He insisted on seeing me. He said he had been Lord Mayor of London, and ought to have a window table. All these were previously engaged. What was to be done? Would I kindly come at once? I persuaded Sir John that window tables were the least desirable, owing to draughts, and returning to my room, I had 4 minutes to dress or risk further rows. After dinner Miss Hassett Bean burst into tears because she was alone in the world owing to the marmoset's death from sea-sickness, and now that she was growing old nobody cared to talk to her. I argued that people were shy because she was more important than they, and had a reputation for satire. It took half an hour for the lady's nose to go from red to pink. I think she had papier poudre in her handkerchief, and then I was obliged to walk on the beach with Miss Enid Biddle to keep Mr. Watts from proposing. As Snell relieved me from sentry duty, I was called by Kruger to discuss certain details of next morning's start for Cairo, and at midnight, when I crawled to my room a shattered wreck, the letters were still unread. "I'm incapable of caring now," I groaned, "what has happened to any of them. If an earthquake has swallowed up our mountain, and Anthony's married Monty, and Bridget's been abducted, or vice versa, and Miss Guest has gone off with the jewels, it will leave me calm." That was the spirit in which I tossed up a coin to see which letter to read first. Heads, Monty's; tails, Anthony's; but the penny rolled away, far under the bed where collar buttons go, and so I opened Biddy's. She began, "My dear good Duffer, for any sake hurry back. Make an excuse to leave your pilgrims the minute you get this, and take the first train to Cairo. Surely the late conductor can be your understudy, and trot the people round Alexandria for a day? We need you more than they do. I picture you reading this early in the morning, with Alexandria still in the distance, for you said you'd arranged to have letters come out to the yacht by the pilot. I shall expect a telegram saying by what train you'll arrive here in the afternoon. You'll understand when I've told you everything, why it's necessary for you to hurry. We have done and seen so many things, it seems years instead of days since you left us in the care of that handsome Hadji of yours. I wonder if really you didn't suspect that I guessed who he was, or did you suspect and didn't care? I caught the look in your eyes, when you first saw him standing under the terrace at Shepherd's, and then, when the name Antoun Effendi came up in the conversation, I put 2 and 2 together. Mrs. East guesses also. I don't know if she did from the first, but she does now. It isn't a question of guessing with either of us, really. It's a certainty. Not that she said anything to me or I to her. That is the malady of us all since you went. We are boiling with secret thoughts, and keeping them to ourselves, which is bad for us and for each other in the long run. I haven't told Monty that the Egyptian Prince, as Rachel Guest has nicknamed him, is your friend Captain Anthony Fenton playing some deep game, partly connected with us, partly connected with a secret of his and yours. The secret you said was a dusty one in which women would not be interested. I haven't told her because I don't want her to know. She is always talking and thinking about him, and is vexed with herself for doing so. She tries to stop, but can't. If she knew who he was, she wouldn't try to stop. She'd let herself go, and feel she was living in a beautiful romance. So she is living in a romance, but I want you to be the hero of it, not your Anthony Fenton. That's why I don't open her eyes to the game that's going on. The man is a perfect devil. Not a bad devil, but a wild devil. Mrs. East doesn't tell Monty that Antoun is Anthony with an H, because she is enjoying the thought that she alone knows the wonderful truth. She imagines that she is in love with him. She believes fate has brought them together, that he is a reincarnation, as she is, and that they ought to belong to each other. Well, let them. She isn't more than 6 or 7 years older than he, and she's rich, though poor compared to Monty, of course, and every day she grows handsomer. So does Monty. As for Rachel Guest, but she is in another part of my story. Yet no, come to think of it, I'll bring her in now, because if it weren't for developments concerning that young woman, I might be able to wait 1 more day without begging you to come to us. She is taking Monty away from me, and something odd is going on, I can't make out what. Anyhow, that horrid Bedr el Gamili is in it, and there's to be a climax, I'm sure, tomorrow night. You'll get this letter tomorrow morning, for I'm writing it early, with my hair down my back, and my coffee not ordered, though I'm starving. We've left Shepherd's because Monty wanted to live for a few days in a hotel close to the Nile, and we were all pleased with the plan, for this was once a palace of Khedive Ismail, and his furniture's still in it, the wildest mixture of orientalized French taste. There's a garden, with paths of vermilion sand brought from somewhere in the desert. But the most convulsive things live along the Nile Valley, and spend their nights braying, hooting, cooing, whining, bellowing, and barking. If only the donkeys and dogs and birds, and a few other sacred animals of Egypt would be a little more reticent, especially after dark, the country would be faultless. But what with worrying myself, and listening to furred and feathered creatures worrying themselves, I couldn't sleep last night, and I want you to help me. You'll be here tomorrow afternoon, and I shall stay in to receive you instead of going to the bazaars with the others, chaperoned by that dark-eyed devil of yours, Antoun. I was there all yesterday, watching crowds of tourists buy beautiful, expensive things for themselves, and horrid, inexpensive things to take to their friends. Cleopatra purchased some disgracefully cheap pearls no self-respecting mummy would be seen in, and my prophetic soul tells me she's going to try and dissolve them in wine. There's to be a fancy dress ball at the hotel tomorrow night, or rather in the adjacent casino, which is one reason we migrated here, and praise the saints if you'll be in time for it, because if anything's going to happen, you'll be able to stop whatever it is. If I were supposed to know that Antoun was Anthony Fenton, I might take him into my counsels. As it is, I can't, and anyhow it wouldn't do much good at present, because a silent duel is going on between him and Monty. He is bent on compelling her to acknowledge his authority. She is bent on resisting it, which is a great compliment to his power, but he doesn't know that, for he doesn't know Monty yet. It would be fun to watch them together, if I hadn't your interest to think of. He hasn't got rid of Bedr al-Gamali, but he would have done so, I'm sure, if it hadn't been for an unexpected turn of the wheel by the hand of fate in the person of Rachel Guest. Her hand is never off the wheel just now. The few days since you have been away have brought out the true inwardness of her. Felice domestica with very little domestica. Perhaps it's the air of Egypt which is having a really extraordinary effect on all of us. Perhaps it's the fact that Monty has given Rachel a lot of lovely clothes which have rejuvenated and apparently revitalized her. But you will see for yourself, and talk things over with your old friend, Biddy. This was a nice letter to read, heaven knew how many hours too late. My fatigue had slipped off like the skin of a grape. I felt energetic enough to start out and walk to Cairo. What could be in Biddy's mind? And what must she have thought when afternoon and evening passed without even a telegram? The evening paper, if she had happened to look, would have told her that the Candace had reached Alexandria in the morning, as she expected, and she could neither have guessed nor believed that the whole day could pass without my having a chance to read her letter. I ransacked the writing-table drawers for a telegraph form, and finding one had begun to address it when I stopped. The message could not go out until morning. Meanwhile there were Monty's and Anthony's letters to read. One or both might give me some clue to the climax Biddy feared for tonight at the ball. I cut open Monty's envelope, which had on it an alluring sunset picture of the pyramids and the name of the hotel. Hastily I ran through the pages. Not a hint of anything disquieting. If I had read her letter instead of Bridget's, I might have gone to my well-earned rest without a qualm. Dear Lord Ernest, Miss Gilder addressed me, in a handwriting which to any expert would reveal some originality, more pride, still more conscientiousness, any amount of self-will, and singularly little conceit. An odd combination, but the gilded rose is that. She went on. You asked me to write to you while you were away, and tell you the news, and what I thought about things. But I'm thinking so much and so fast that I can't sort out my thoughts. I suppose it must be so with everyone who comes to Egypt for the first time. Everything fascinates and absorbs me, even more than I had hoped it would, almost too much, I feel sometimes. Your Antoun Effendi is a very good guide, and I am not sorry that we have him, except once in a while. And now and then I'm glad. We're proud of his looks when we go about, for everyone stares at him and envies us for having him to take us about, instead of being condemned to a mere dragoman. Oh, talking of dragomen, you see I will call them that. We still have Bedr, though I know you thought we ought to give him up, and I don't see how we are ever to discharge him now, for he has attached himself to Rachel G. in the most wonderful way. It is pathetic. It began with a talk they had the day you left, about his having been in America, and about religion. She found him half inclined to be converted, and of course her goodness and unselfishness made her long to snatch him like a brand from the burning. He thinks no one ever talked so wonderfully about religion as she does, which she, dear thing, attributes to the fact that she taught Sunday school in Salem. She says if she can have him to work upon, even for a few weeks, she is sure to make him a convert. We haven't wasted a minute since you went away, but have seen sights from morning till night, so as not to have missed anything when we leave Cairo on the Enchantress Isis. I hope you'll be pleased that I've given up my dream of having a private dahabeah, and that we shall be with you on Sir Marcus Lark's boat. She really is a beauty. Antoun took us over her, and on board we met Sir Marcus, who was showing some friends round. Antoun introduced him to us. I think Sir M. asked him to do it. We had great fun, for Sir Marcus seemed to take the most violent fancy to Aunt Clara, who didn't like him at all. She says now that she believes when she was Cleopatra he was Caesar, and that it's a pity he can't wear a wreath to hide his baldness, as she remembers his doing then. It's only a very little bald spot really, and Rachel Guest says it reminds her of a tonsure on the head of a fine-looking monk. Aunt C. quite resents Sir Marcus being able to engage the services of you and Antoun. She wants you both to be there, but she doesn't like Sir M. to have a superior position to Antoun's. That day, on the Enchantress Isis, Sir M. invited us to have tea on the deck, and it really was enchanting. A deck like a huge open-air drawing-room, or one of our biggest verandas at Newport, or somewhere, with jolly green wicker chairs and tables and sofas with heaps of cushions. But I forgot, you've seen the boat. The best rooms were engaged, but when we talked to Sir Marcus, he called a man who can speak many languages in bits, broken English, cracked German, fractured French, and goodness knows what all. Between them they arranged it somehow that we should have our choice, and the other people were to take what was left. I would have refused, because it didn't seem fair, but it was for Aunt Clara's sake, evidently, that Sir M. wanted to make the exchange, and she accepted. She was as haughty as a queen, but in a rather fascinating, soft way that I think men like. And she was looking beautiful. So is Rachel, as even Biddy admits. I do believe Rachel looks younger than I do, in some new dresses and hats she has. I never noticed before, but I fancy now that we're rather alike. I'm so delighted to see her enjoying herself so much, for you know she's wonderful. Think what courage it must have taken to break with her tiresome old life, because she felt she must see the glory of the world, when a tiny legacy gave her the chance she'd longed for. She wouldn't have had a penny left after she'd finished her trip, if Aunt C. and I hadn't been able to help her out. It's a privilege to do anything for such a brave creature, and I can't bear to think of her having to go back when this is over to the dull round. Perhaps some way out will be found for her. I've fallen in love with Cairo, although, or perhaps because, I still feel as if I were moving in a marvellous picture. Antoun does make it live for us. I will say that for him, though he can be so annoying that at times he spoils everything, and makes me wish you'd won my hat instead of my winning his green turban. I'm dying to find out how you got it. But of course I can't ask him, it would be an infra dig. You must tell me when you come. I think the one he wears now is handsomer, though. I wish I could change it for mine. We've been to heaps of mosques, and I can't help wishing we were the only tourists in Cairo. Of course this is a selfish wish, and, as dear Biddy says, it's quite funny to think how each tourist feels that he is the only spiritually minded, imaginative person travelling, that he alone has the right to be in Egypt, that all the others are offensive, vulgar creatures who desecrate the beautiful places with their presence. But really, you know, it gets on one's nerves, meeting droves of silly men in pith helmets with little white lambrequins looped up, when it would be so much more appropriate to wear the kind of hats they have at home. And some of the women are weird. They have the queerest ideas of what is suitable for Egypt. One friend of Better's refused to go about and be seen with the ladies who'd engaged him, as he was the smartest dragoman in Cairo and had his reputation to keep up. Don't you like that? Even Antoun laughed, which he hardly ever does. He's so dignified I wish his turban would blow off or something. I wonder how he'd look without it, and if most of the charm would be gone. Almost, I hope so. One doesn't like to catch oneself feeling toward an Egyptian, even for a minute, as one does towards men of one's own blood. I mean, on the same level, or even as if a person like that were above one. It's just the picturesque dignity of the costume, and the pose, perhaps. And then this strange glamour of East is over everybody and everything here. I used to wonder why people wrote and spoke of the East as mysterious. Why should it be more mysterious than the West, I would ask. Nobody could explain exactly. They only said, "It is." Now I know why. At least I feel why. Without his green turban, or in a European coat instead of his graceful silk robe, and away from these luminous sunsets of pale rose and gold and emerald, Antoun would be nothing extraordinary, would he? He says he is considered old-fashioned in his way of dress. Most of his friends wear European clothes, and the tarbouch which Egyptians love because it never blows away or falls off when they pray. He does make me angry, because he wants to banish the beggars and poor men who sell things in the street, instead of letting me give and buy. What am I for with all my money except to do things for people? And it's such fun making them happy by saying, "I want a cat necklace," or a scarab, or whatever they have, instead of pushing past with a stony glare as if they were dust under our feet. Of course we're attended by great crowds wherever we go, because it's got round that we don't refuse anyone. Consequently, it takes a little long to arrive anywhere. But what does that matter in Egypt? Already I'm losing my American hustle. I want to eat lotuses, which seem out of season in Egypt now. I've asked for them everywhere, but can't get them. I want to feel back in the Middle Ages, in Cairo, which, as Antoine says, is an Oriental and a medieval gateway to Egypt older than history. And how am I looking forward to the desert? Sir Marcus tells us that you are to take the people of the Candace for a desert trip before they go up the Nile, so of course you must count us among your trippers, and Mr. Willis and Mr. Sheridan, who have settled to go on the Isis. You didn't mention the desert plan before you went away. No news of that poor, beautiful child, Wretched Bey's wife, though I've written twice. I'm worried about her. Mabel she used to be. Now she's Mabella Hanim. Biddy says you'll arrive for the ball tomorrow night, but somehow I don't feel you will. I don't know why you should. Men don't care for such things much. And of course I shall not dance, as I'm still in half mourning. I shall only look on, and then Rachel and I have an amusing plan for the end of the evening. But even if you came, we couldn't let you in on the secret, as you would think it silly. Yours sincerely, Rosamond Gilder. Mine sincerely, Rosamond Gilder. So she ended her letter, with youthful and characteristic dignity, childishly unaware, apparently, that there was more to read between the lines than in the lines themselves. Had I read this Rosamond letter first, the last 4 or 5 sentences would have meant little for me. As it was, I would have given a month out of my future for the gift of an astral body which could go this minute to the ball at the Gesserit Palace. I was lost in the mystery of that amusing plan. In Anthony's letter lay the last hope of a clue, but in it there was none. He did not even mention Monty's name. It was all about that desert trip, which, from her, I hadn't taken seriously. Sir Marcus was actually planning it. Kruger had written that some of the passengers were clamoring for a few days' camping, and the idea was to send them off in my care after 3 days in Cairo, while the others remained in charge of Antoine, who wasn't yet ready to leave. Fenton said, "Somebody's trying to defeat my scheme for getting the Sheikh's tomb moved. I don't know who it is yet. Meanwhile my time and my head are so full that in the few hours of the night I put aside for sleep, I dream queerer dreams than the visits of ghostly sheikhs. Apropos of dreams, do you know by chance a man who answers this description? Elderly, stoutish, red face, grey hair, black moustache, pale eyes with a sharp look in them? Sounds commonplace, doesn't it? But I have a recurring dream of such a man, whose face I never saw elsewhere. For the last 3 nights, as soon as I shut my eyes, he comes. He seems to interrupt some scene between you and Lark and myself, and I see him looking over Lark's shoulder. Then he turns quickly away, and tiptoes off to a very low, closed door in a deep recess. There he disappears into shadow, and I wake up with a jump, or slide off into another dream, but generally this rouses me, for there's an impression of something stealthy in the shadow round the door. That so ordinary a type of person should be in a dream. You'll laugh at my asking if you've ever known such a man, and say that I'm back at my old tricks again, as a dreamer of dreams. Never mind, I scored, dreaming of our Mountain of the Golden Pyramid the night before I got your letter with Ferlini's papers. I can't help feeling that there may be something in dreams, in mine anyhow, though I never have any except in Egypt. This one, about the red-faced man and the closed door in the deep recess, is getting a bit on my nerves. Excited as I was over the patchwork of news, I laughed scornfully at Anthony's dream, for the man he described might be Colonel Corcoran. End of chapter 9.